I've said that District 1 really has an incredible set of leaders. We are extremely fortunate to have people across our region who are experts in many things. And so having the opportunity to bring that leadership into the people's house here so that we can inform policymaking is really the crux of this. So we'll go ahead and get started. And then we will make this PowerPoint available following the presentation. So if there's anything you want to go back and refer to, or if there's anything that you want to give us feedback on, we'll have the opportunity to do that. So Jessica, if you could advance for me. So today we are diving right in. What is the purpose of us having a leadership council? What would be our guiding principles? What does it mean to be a member? Are there some specific qualifications? And what does the application process look like? Obviously, this is a voluntary position. These are voluntary seats. And it really is an important advisory role. And so we're going to get into that a little bit further down the line. But the next bullet point is really sort of the reason, and that is how to advance change. We also want to make sure that we address a leadership structure, because I really believe in effective time sensitive meetings. And so anyone that goes to an advisory board meeting, you need to know that your time is being utilized to the greatest extent. So having a good leadership structure is critical. And then of course, how to become an officer, and then what would an annual work plan look like? And then we'll move into questions. All right, so to dive in a little bit, what is the purpose of a District 1 Leadership Council? If you've followed my work and the way that I try really hard to represent District 1, you'll know that I believe in research-based, data-driven, community-informed decision-making. Policy issues that we have come before us, policy issues that we put before the board, both need to have some substance. And what I mean by that is, what do we know? What's the deeper understanding of the issue? What does our community feel about the issue? Our neighborhood needs are extremely varying across our district. And it's something I love about our district is that it does not have a homogenous type, right? There's every type of neighborhood, and we really want to make sure that those voices are included. And then we also need to set long-term priorities. Having representative government, local government, do an effective job representing the people, we need to be able to actually access the people. And so even when I'm out at community meetings, or I go to town halls, or we have events in the community, I often find that it doesn't allow for that creative problem solving that I believe we could get to in a leadership council format. And understanding that that would put me in a listening position on the other end of the advisory board's recommendations. So the idea is to really come up with something that is thoughtful and results oriented. The decision-making process for me has always included where my community weighs in, but I constantly have concerns that I'm not hearing from the people who aren't necessarily in a position to complain about something. And so even though I like getting those complaints because I know exactly what to then work on, it's really important that we get voices that don't have particularly a complaint, but maybe a thought, an idea, a solution, so that decision-making is holistic and that it can encompass the long-term priorities of our community. So one of the things before we dive into this about the guiding principles, but it's reflective, is that we, in our office meetings here, with staff, we've talked a little bit about what would a mission statement be. And I want to just read what I believe is a draft mission statement, but I want to hone in on this when we really sit down to do leadership council at our first in-person meeting, because I think that we have to start out with that mission statement so that we can reframe. If we ever get off track, we can go right back to that mission statement. So the mission statement that, is the draft mission statement was that the Leadership Council would be to advise the District 1 Commissioner by elevating community voices, conducting issue-focused research, and developing actionable policy recommendations that advance equity, opportunity, and quality of life for all District 1 residents. So that's a starting point. And I just want to let that be out there in the world so that you can mull over it, and then we can circle back to it when we get to our first in-person Leadership Council meeting. So our guiding principles, I think it's really important to make sure that we have very clear principles. And among those is that this will be community centered, that this is a particular group that will represent the western portion of Orange County. I work every day for all Orange County residents. Every vote that I take affects all Orange County residents. But I was hired by the people of West Orange County and want to make sure that when we make advice, when I'm getting advice, when I'm getting information about how things are in the community, that it goes back to the community. Results driven. I think everyone has volunteered for or sat on a board at some point in their life that you think, well, they're nice people, but I'm not sure what we're working on here. That is not how I do things. We will have some, what I believe are some pretty aggressive goals to make sure that we have input at the decision-making level from this advisory council. Collaborative. One of the things I love about this role, and of course having partnerships in the community, is that collaboration is at the root of that. Having partnerships at our municipal governments, having partnerships in our nonprofits, those are all part of that collaborative effort to provide higher quality of life for the residents. Transparency, this is a big one, and I want to make sure that I am really harping on it for a moment because it was a pillar of why I ran for office. I felt very strongly that the trust that people have in government has eroded over time, largely because much of government happens behind some kind of veil. And the idea for me when I came into office was to put as much of it into the sunlight as possible so that people felt that they were included, that they were represented, and ultimately that they had influence. You didn't need to be some kind of a special interest to have influence. You just needed to be a resident, a constituent, somebody who is a member of our community. And so the other piece of the transparency pillar is something that I do need to address, which is that we operate in the sunshine in Orange County, and everything I do when it is work related is part of public record. This is what we want. We want public record for our elected officials. Unfortunately, not every level of government has to operate under that same sunshine law. But for us, when we have a work product that we've been potentially working on in a leadership council meeting, all of that is public record. And so it's an important thing for me to make sure you all know the emails to the office, emails back and forth, those things all are open to public records. And it is, it can be a little bit intimidating, but ultimately that type of transparency should be the goal for everything, for everybody. So the other part that I want to make sure that we address when we look at these sort of pillars, and especially in transparency, is conflicts of interest. Another driving force for me entering local government was my concern about the conflicts of interest that were occurring. And what that means is that an individual that may be making a decision that affects an entire county is benefiting potentially from that decision themselves. If that is the case, if there is some financial benefit to be had by advancing a policy, by indicating support for something, we need to disclose that. There should be some available disclosure by our members. And so that doesn't mean that you will have to make financial reports. What that means is that if we're looking to advance a policy and it's part of your business, it's okay to say, you know, full disclosure, this is my business, but I want to give you my input. And that is absolutely a part of how we do government, is to still include stakeholders, but with full transparency of what their interests are. Nonpartisan, local government is the last bastion of work where we can do things in a nonpartisan fashion. We're working on issues. We are working on things that are quality of life, and we are leaving the politics at the door. And then, of course, equitable. One of the things I think is really important in a local government is that oftentimes a smaller community isn't as well represented, I should say, as a larger community or an affluent community, because of the fact that we sometimes see more resources going into certain either highly populated or potentially more vocal communities. And so I ask everybody to put on that hat to make sure that, okay, yes, I come with my information, but I understand that as a leader in this council, that we're looking to make sure that the entire community is represented, and that is equally distributed for the public, for public interest, and people can feel comfortable that their voices are being heard. So membership or member qualifications and application process. I think that the most important piece of this is truly the desire to be in a leadership role, in an advisory role. Obviously, one of the things that we're seeking is individuals who do and have already had some community involvement. That being said, if you are somebody who has not before, but thinks this is where you want to dive in, certainly just let us know. It is a collaborative process. So we are not looking for any adversarial type situations. We really want to make sure that the leadership council feels collegial and respectful to one another. Willing to commit some time and effort. This is a volunteer commitment, and I understand that I'm sorry, I'm seeing a message pop up. Oh, okay, I'll get to that after. Sorry, Alexis, I think I thought there was something urgent going on. As a volunteer, there will be obviously some competition for your time. And so understanding that we're asking for some time, not too much time. So do at the very least, take some comfort in that we're going to probably make sure we're narrowing it to very distinct timelines for our meetings with very specific agendas. And we're looking at monthly meetings. And then, of course, comfortable reviewing materials and participating in discussion. My hope is that we have a wide variety of and a good cross-section of people from across the district who have different backgrounds, that they can bring their experience and knowledge into this leadership council. But I want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable there, diving into things that maybe they haven't reviewed before, because we really need to get an understanding if it's going to be a policy that we're weighing in on, either during a board meeting or something that we're advancing through an ordinance update, that everyone's done their homework on it and has been comfortable getting that information and reviewing the information. And then, of course, solutions oriented. I feel very strongly that we can get a lot done in probably a short period of time, so long as we keep those goals in sight. And so developing those, articulating those, and then mapping out the steps to get to those solutions. So the board will have a number of committees, and this is another component of our leadership council that was devised of based on the experience that we've had here in the office, the issues that I believe we do have a number of constituents that care about, that have expertise on, but sometimes don't have the proper avenue to try to be able to navigate how to affect policy. And so these standing committees, and this is again, a working document, a working draft, housing, growth, and infrastructure. If you ask me as Commissioner Wilson, I think growth could be a standing committee just by itself. But understanding that those issues are inherently linked when they come before our board within a certain division or department, it makes sense to have that as a standing committee. Public safety, health, and human services. I think this is another one that is fairly broad, but we understand that we have under the umbrella of Orange County Services, emergency services. Orange County Fire and Rescue is wholly governed from Orange County, that we have our health services department, and of course the ways that we interact with our residents, and especially our most vulnerable or ones that are confronting health issues and our current state of economic challenges, we've heard a lot from people that this is going to continue to be a topic that they want to look at, talk about, and look for solutions. So it was important to put that up there. Economic development and workforce. We're so fortunate in District 1 that we quite literally have the highest tax receipts in the entire county. And I think that what that means is that we have had an incredible amount of entrepreneurship, of investment from all levels of economic development. But we need to make sure that we're not taking our eye off of that. We have to see issues that are sometimes being talked about out in the world that maybe haven't gotten here to the chambers yet, to the dais yet. And so that economic development and workforce can be, forward looking in ideas, or can be to some extent a discussion about safety net. And then, of course, environment, sustainability, and resilience. I think it's no secret this one is near and dear to me. For those people who I think have less understanding of environmental protection or environmental work in policy, we really do also include the sustainability and resiliency when we think about what's happening in our post-hurricane recovery, how to make our entire area more resilient in a natural disaster, and of course, sustaining our quality of life throughout these very large changes that we're having in our climate. So that's an important one looking into the future. Quality of life, arts and culture. Another really incredible, I believe, gift that we have here in Orange County is the amount of creativity. Our arts and cultural affairs community is strong and vibrant, and we have the opportunity in Orange County to continue to invest our tourist development tax dollars into arts and cultural affairs. But there are many things happening in that world that I don't know if, they've come to light, that they need to be talked about, or are there some goals that we can continue to look at for the future? And then, of course, governance, policy, and community engagement. This one should be the big blurb underneath all of them, because it's truly why this leadership council matters. There should be the ability for any resident to have an advisory role to their local government. I think it's difficult. I think it's difficult to be able to do that. And so what I want to do is set up that mechanism and continue to look at goals and in ways, very concrete ways, to engage the community, engage communities that we haven't been able to reach, and then look at inefficiencies within the governance of Orange County. It's huge. Orange County is a huge county, and I mean, it's a county that's growing in population, but it's also large geographically, and it's large in the services and divisions. And so understanding what the community, what our leaders in our community see as potential efficiency issues is critical in moving forward. And then the policy piece will actually be threaded through all of these, because like I said, we're not getting together to, it's not group therapy, even though everyone likes a group therapy session. It is, and I would participate in that in a different place, but this is really for us to develop policy. And this is for us to be able to have informed decision-making as a district when I represent at the board. And then, of course, we're going to include youth leadership. I feel like there's a huge blind spot in government for the contributions of our young folks. They inevitably, whenever I engage with them, whether it's a Boy Scout troop or a high school National Honor Society, they always have incredible ideas, and problem solving is sometimes a little more comfortable for them because they have not been part of a workforce for some period of time that changes the way they process. So having their contributions are really important. So when we have these standing committees with the interest in those, should there be enough interest in any one of those, then what we'll do is take the time to really hone in on the agendas at issues that can be worked on within Orange County government. I think we could easily identify hundreds of issues that we would love to address in policy, but if they can't be solved, resolved, or influenced by local government, then we may not want to spend time on them. So part of that issue identification is making sure that within Orange County's governmental structure, within the governmental structure of a charter county, because we're fortunate enough to be a charter county, that it's something that we can work on. Research and fact finding has been something that I've been extremely fortunate to have had brilliant staff over the years and interns who have created white papers, who have done deep dives on what's happening in other jurisdictions. And it's really proved to be the way we can move the needle on policy. And so having data-driven, research-based policy advancement is the biggest goal within our leadership council. Our discussion analysis, that's going to be part of our regular meeting. And so that we're kind of thinking through any piece of an effort, an issue, before we move forward with it. And then draft recommendations would be further down the line. Committee vote, this will obviously be a democratic process in making sure that we are advancing issues that the majority agree with advancing. And then council review and vote, we have preliminarily structured the leadership council to have the subcommittees report back to a larger committee in order to advance something. And then having a tracking and follow-up is just as important as doing the research and the lead up to a policy determination or anything that we want to advance to the Board of County Commission. And what that allows us to do is to go back and really either evidence that it was the right time, the right effort, or it allows us to tweak something. And so understanding that sometimes when we make policy determination, it's the first bite at an apple, it's the first try at an issue. And we all understand that sometimes experience gives us a completely different perspective on it, and then we can be even more effective. All right, so the good news is we don't have to do any of this today. I'm just giving you the structure, but the leadership structure needs to have some reliability so that we can stay on time and stay really focused on the goals and mission of the Leadership Council. So there will be a chair. These things will be decided in our second in-person meeting so that we have some time to consider sort of what that entails. The chair, of course, will work very closely with the District 1 office to create an agenda so that we stay very much on track for time and that we're respectful of everyone's input. And then we will work through a process for doing committee chairs based on interest, based on, I would say, volunteer participation and something in therein. I would say that the chair's main role will be to be a primary liaison. My hope is to really see a leadership council that can autonomously work through some of these issues and then provide some concrete reporting so that I have a better understanding of what the work that was done at the Leadership Council is. I would fear that if there was some perception, if I was in the room at all times, that there wasn't going to be as much free conversation about getting to the root of an issue or what next steps should be. So then there's also a vice chair. I would say that I think in a lot of councils or committees can be also a pro tem. If the chair is out, they would set in to the chair's seat and make sure that we were staying on the agenda. And then of course, supports community coordination, having sort of that role of assisting with the logistics. And then a secretary, which would really be helpful for us so that we can make sure, because this, again, is a public document, public record, that we are keeping, excellent notes. We have not made a determination about recording. It doesn't have to be recorded for minutes, but I believe it, and I mean like actually physically recorded. But if we have someone that does a great job taking notes, we may be able to do that in a very efficient way that allows for almost immediate posting of the minutes for anybody that wants to see what the Leadership Council has been working on or discussing. And then, of course, maintaining those official records. My office will work very closely to make sure that those records are maintained and available for public viewing. It's part of our responsibility here. So I already kind of talked about this piece, so we can kind of zoom through it. The council members will elect officers. So if you're thinking about wanting to be in a chair role, or you're thinking to yourself, I'm the best note taker on the planet and I'm really organized, then, bring that with you to the first in-person meeting so that we can go ahead and make sure that we have a nomination slate, and that we have the ability to lock those in fairly early on so that we have a predictable schedule in the future. So we have right now on the calendar that in April, we're going to go ahead and get those selections placed, a slate put into place for voting on. Council members will vote. I will not have a vote, which is kind of a nice independent way to make sure that we have that set of officers in the position that they want to be in based on the group's decision. So these are, once again, things that we honed in on so that we could have really tangible items to include in our council goals, which I think obviously an annual work plan sounds very achievable, but what that should entail is also some priority issues. We understand that for every priority issue, there are always going to be sub issues. And so those things will come organically, and we can take care of them as they come. If there's something that needs to be discussed in a subcommittee that has come forward as part of the research in an issue, then the group can determine at that point, okay, does this go with a separate committee? And those things can be done internally. Key research topics. Okay, so I was going to say, I think we pretty much covered that. The calendar is going to be, it flies. I will tell you, I've decided that time flies whether you're having fun or not. So we can be really busy, and all of a sudden you look up and you realize that half the year is gone. And so we want to make sure that that we set those goals based on a calendar that aligns itself with the Orange County Commission calendar. We are in a 2-week legislative cycle here in Orange County, which sounds strange, but it means that every 2 weeks there are items that we're voting on. There are issues that are raised, discussed, work sessions that the type of research that this council could get done might really help inform what the outcome of those types of work sessions, what the end product is. And so having that calendar set up early in this process will be really important. Obviously, we are a few months into the 2026 calendar year. So our annual year for election and annual work plan may look a little different this year, and then we can adjust it. The other thing I think is really important about a leadership group, a council, is to be able to take a step back at some point after work has been done and reflect on where we see strengths, where we see some weaknesses, where we see potential growth, where we think we can, cut out something, and efficiencies. Those things are all part of what I really want to see within the group as their own self-assessment, so that there is an opportunity to continue to improve and evolve. There's nothing worse than something that becomes status quo for year in and year out that doesn't really address the issues that the mission statement and the intent of an advisory board was created for. So keeping our eye on the prize is really the goal here. And the best way to do that is to go back to the people who are doing the work and ask, how are we doing here? What do you think? What should happen next? All right. So that was a lot. And I think I did kind of zoom through it because I know it's a Friday afternoon and there's probably more exciting events in the community. But I want to make sure that if you have a question about any piece of this presentation about our really what we're rolling out as a first time advisory council, in the leadership council format. If you want to ask that now, I think Jessica was going to let those go into our chat. If you can put it on a chat, if you want to email it to us, if it's a little more in depth, or if you want to think about it and send us emails later, please do not hesitate, because I think if you're like me, sometimes I get a light bulb moment later on and want to make sure that I'm rounding back.
So I think John had an amazing question. He asked if it would be worth
Jessica,
it.
I'm having a hard time hearing. Say it again.
John had an amazing question. Asked if it would be worth it to be a part of this council if he would be redistricted into District 8.
Yes. So I think this is a really great question, because I've had so many questions about the new districts. Under Florida Constitution, under constitutional principles for redistricting, the elected representative for an area continues to serve that area through their term. And so I will be able to serve all my area through the term, even though there will be a new commissioner in the next election cycle. Our plan here, my plan has always been to try to make sure that I was transitioning all areas of Orange County in my district as smoothly as possible. So planning already to do sunshine meetings with whoever that representative is, so that, and I say sunshine meetings, that means it'll be agended in public, so that we can talk about any issues that we've been working on, constituent cases, projects, with the new commissioner. The reason why I have to do it that way is I can't just go down the hallway and talk to them. It has to be a public meeting. So, but yes, if you live in an area that is part of the redistrict, one of the new districts, but you're in District 1 right now, I would encourage you to participate. I think that will be an extremely helpful tool to have leaders that are contributing from those areas as we transition post-election in the fall.
Anyone want to ask a question? Not in the chat, just turning on your mic. You could raise your hand.
Do you have a target size, the number of members for the council for D1? I think ideally, and this is, based on my experience, that a council that gets over that 25 to 30 becomes very burdensome. I think if there's more interest than than we thought there might be, the idea would then definitely be to make sure that we're getting those committees, the standing committees set, right? I don't want anyone who is interested in a leadership role in participating in this to feel like they've been cut out of it. So we're really trying to make sure we consider really all possibilities. And so don't feel like, oh, am I going to make the cut? Because really, if you've already made it here and you've decided that you want to participate in this, we want to make sure that there's a space. Now, that being said, we understand that if the larger an advisory board is, and if the standing committees themselves are substantially represented, that what we might do is really tailor the collaborative meeting where the standing committees report sort of what their work has been on a rotating basis, so that we're not using up people's time, in a way that I think everyone gets nervous about. How much time is this going to take? And so I will be very cognizant of that, and trying to make sure that the committee reporting in, the standing committee reporting in, if their work is very complex, if there's a lot going on there, that we make sure that we're giving a rotation to that. I think was there another question? Thank you.
Yes. JJ had asked if education would be a part of the committee, and how, if so, which one?
Absolutely. I think this is going to be a little bit of, so education's, I think, an incredible part of what we do every day here. And I mean that for myself. I learn new things every day, and lots of them. So yes, and I think that the really ideal situation is that if there's an expert that we need to bring in or to get information from, that when we realize that that is really a key to developing either some policy principles or getting to the next step of a solution, that we do that through my office. And so that's where that communication is really key, and making sure that if we need an expert, if we need somebody from a particular division, or let's say another level of government, to provide us some expertise or some technical information, we can do that at any time.
And does every district commissioner have a council?
I don't know. So I will say that I know there are variations that I've heard of. And I know that like Commissioner Moore has her people of, which is, it's definitely an advisory council. It's geographically based as opposed to sort of standing committees based on issues. I think it's something that is excellent. She's had great success with that. In what I feel like is the decision-making process for our entire board, there are times that, I wish I could bring with me the expertise of some of the individuals that I meet out in our committee. And so understanding that leadership role in expertise, or in really just your lived experience wherever you are, and what you want to bring to this, is part of what should be my decision-making process. I did not want to go with a geographically set type of advisory council or leadership council. I really wanted to be able to have individuals who felt strongly enough about providing work on and time on working towards tangible goals that we could bring to the Board of County Commission.
Is the expected time commitment for this, and when would the council meetings be held and where?
So, and Jessica, you can help me with this. I think we did calendar the first meeting, but one of the agenda items on the first meeting will be to calendar the remaining. And so that is something that, with contributions from participating community members, leaders that are committing to being part of the council, we will need to calendar, and I would like to do it a year out so that we have sort of some very reliable and consistent planning. We talked about doing this time of day. I think at this point, if you're listening and you have thoughts about this, please, please, please weigh in now. When I was a parent teacher organizer, we did interchange. Sometimes I did a daytime meeting, and then the next month an afternoon or evening meeting, so that people who maybe couldn't do a daytime one because of work schedules could attend the evening one, and people who are shift work, so we were able to capture. I don't know if that is necessary for our leadership council, but I am, really motivated to try to make sure that we're capturing the individuals who are interested in stepping up right now and being part of a leadership group. Yes, I see Tracy Smith-Klein. Good to see you. Will the slides be available? Yes. We will make these available. And I think I've got my staff on board here. We can do it a couple different ways. We can push it out in an email, or if you register, we can send that out. And then we'll try to make it available through, put it on the website, and try to make it available maybe through the newsletter, the next newsletter. Will the officer team have additional meetings? So I think that's a great question. I would assume at the very least in the beginning, yes. I think it's important that there's some cohesive strategic logistics happening with a leadership team to make sure that part isn't being hashed out when the larger group is together, so that you can get right to work on the issues.
As well, will the council be involved in the development of the Orange County Micromobility Ordinance?
So any policy that is coming to us for discussion, consideration, and is within the scope of Orange County is up for an issue that could be addressed. Again, I think what we'll have to do, and I'm saying this because it's a leadership council where really leaders will decide what gets moved, as advice to me. We'll have to see what the overall, I think, approach is to particular strategic items that are already in the process, right? So that one is in process right now and will be coming back to the board. So I absolutely am going to say yes, with the contingency that this will be a leadership council, that the structure of those meetings in the agenda will be laid out systematically by the group.
I definitely think it would fall into one of the committees though, so yeah. Lori asks here, will there be additional detail for each committee versus just the top line that was presented today?
Absolutely. We just didn't want to get too in the weeds. Absolutely.
Yes, will members go through sunshine training? Will this committee be under the same rules as other county boards?
No. So the good news about this board is that because it's not based in a piece of legislation, that as an advisory board, you will not have to worry about the sunshine for discussion with one another. If you are engaging with the Board of County Commission, we'd have to talk about, and I do think we'll set up a training at some point for sunshine. The bare minimum, I'll make all of the information available about sunshine. For those of you who maybe haven't heard discussion about sunshine, it was that transparency piece, that if we have an elected body or a body of decision makers under Florida law at this level, they can't speak to each other about things they're voting on without it being on the record and published. So the idea is that if I want to talk to Commissioner Cordero about something and it is something that we're going to vote on, the only way that I can do that legally under Florida law is to send out a public notice that we're meeting and to have minutes available and to have an agenda printed ahead of time. So I do think it's important for us to continue to talk about sunshine because it is all still public record. And we do need to be aware and conscious that even a relay of information from me to my colleagues before a Board of County Commission meeting can be considered a sunshine violation. So we can go over, I would say, the very least, the most important pieces of that law before we start at the very first meeting. And I'll have the county attorney's office develop a specific PowerPoint for us or a handout for us.
And Amy asked, will there be a specific strategic planning meeting? Will this be made from the officer team or the leadership group as a whole?
So Amy, it's a great question. And we talked about this, how deep do we get in laying out sort of those strategic, the topics of interest, the issues. And the first thing we had to start with was interest in actual leadership, in participation, and then what those people who are interested in this leadership potential position, what they want to participate in, right? So if we take a look at the level of interest in the committees, and there is a very obvious one or two of those that has an overwhelming interest, then I think we're going to know a little better about what we need to do to get some is back work done, right? Some information done. And then do we clean up sort of the other committees and say, okay, we're going to collapse this, or we need to separate these two. And so this is a starting point. It's a launching pad. I invite your feedback. I think, Amy, we've sat on committees before where sometimes hindsight is 2020, where you see, the way that the organization could have been set up for more productivity. So if you have thoughts on it, please let me know. Again, I think some of the standing committee groupings feels very broad for me to look at. I was very afraid, though, that if we made them very specific or too specific, that we wouldn't have enough interest.
I think this might be our final question, unless there's any more pouring in.
Thank you.
Would the meetings be held in person, and or Zoom?
I'm sorry, what was the last part?
Would the meetings be held in person or Zoom?
Okay, so we are planning to do in-person meetings. That being said, I think that there's an opportunity at some point to be either hybrid or have an option for a call-in, something like that, so that we make sure that people who have been consistent, are still participating if they're pulled away. And I don't want to qualify, asking volunteers to do a volunteer role and then come back and demand, a certain number of in-person meetings. But it is important that we get the in-person participation for a number of reasons, among them really having that collaborative effort, and especially if within the committee itself, if there are topics of interest where we are bringing in either an expert or we have some information, to have that in person, I think there's a value to it. I do also really see the importance of making sure that we can provide ways for everyone to participate. So just know that I have not closed my mind to a hybrid situation. The other thing I will say is that if there are opportunities for us to do the in-person meetings in the district, that may be also something that we can try to schedule. Again, I wanted to find out sort of where we land in our numbers before identifying a location, because I didn't want to jump into something bigger than what we need or smaller than what we are going to need. And so starting the first one here at the administration building, because we really have a wide assortment of meeting space here, whether we need, a large conference room or potentially something even bigger. So we'll start there, and then try to make sure that as we develop that calendar, that we identify the locations before it goes to publish.
And then just to reiterate, we will be having our first official District 1 Leadership Council meeting on March 31st at 5 p.m. Again, it's a Tuesday, March 31st at 5 p.m.
And that will be here at Administration Building. But again, we'll get out more information about where exactly based on the numbers, so that we're not making people sit on the floor. If you think of anything else, I really want to thank you all for being here for this and for your interest, and quite frankly, just the type of leadership that we have across this county in so many different ways every single day. It blows my mind, and it makes me really grateful to be in this role. But if you have any questions, if you have any thoughts or feedback, please share them. And from here, again, this is our starting point. And so we just want to make sure that we are gathering those questions, answering them, and then setting our agenda for the next meeting. Jessica, is there anything else? Thank you so much. Is there anything else before we say goodbye and good weekend?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much again. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody.